So the Senate can get one other candidate because there's no, there are two consuls. Caesar is one. The guy that they get to run with Julius Caesar, or against him, and he does win in second place, is a guy named Bibulus. Bibulus is an enemy of Caesar. He's a leading voice in the kind of conservative optimates group of the Senate. He is pledged to oppose everything that Caesar done. He's like Caesar derangement syndrome, right? Anything Caesar says, he advocates the opposite. Doesn't matter if the Senate agreed with it, a year ago. If Caesar proposes it, then it's wrong, it's bad, we're not going to do it. And that's what Bibulus does. He just vetoes everything. Everything that Caesar does is vetoed by Bibulus. And in the end, right, Caesar is trying to pay his debts back to Pompey. He needs the land bill, he needs the bailout, and all of these things. And this is just sort of a way to kind of resolve this problem. Bibulus basically takes a new approach, which had been done a little bit, but it had never been done at this scale, which is every day that Caesar would go and convene the Centuriate Assembly, or Caesar's allies in the tribunate would convene the plebeian assembly. Anytime one of those assemblies were called, Bibulus would go in and he would say, I think I heard some lightning. I thought, I saw some birds flying the wrong way in the sky. The gods are not happy with this meeting. We can't have it. And he is able to do that, right? The consul has the right to determine what the gods actually want, and this has an effect on whether meetings could be held, right? So this is what Suetonius, who's a biographer in kind of the late 1st century AD, that's this guy Suetonius, he writes a biography of Caesar, from which, by the way, we have a lot of information about Caesar that we wouldn't have, including some of these stories about Julius Caesar being a kind of slightly disreputable person. So Caesar brought forward an agrarian law, right, which would have redistributed land to Pompey's veterans. And his colleague announced adverse omens. Now, eventually, Caesar realizes he can't get things done with Bibulus here. And so what Suetonius tells us is that Caesar just uses violence. Again, Pompey's veterans are very, very helpful in this regard. They actually keep Bibulus from even showing up. Cato, at one point, tries to go and speak against Caesar, and he is threatened with arrest. Like they're going to arrest him and potentially imprison him and beat him. Feces are thrown, rotten fruit. Like they do everything they can. Caesar's allies and Pompey's veterans do everything they can to intimidate Bibulus, Cato, and other conservatives who are trying to stop Caesar from passing this legislation. Eventually, we're told that Bibulus just had to stay at his house. He was so afraid of getting attacked. And he simply would issue proclamations announcing adverse omens from his house. So, I mean, obviously, Bibulus is making this up. Like, clearly, he's, you can see both sides of the argument, right? Bibulus is misusing his power. At the same time, Caesar is obviously misusing his power as well. And as history goes on, both of those sides, right, will throw accusations at the other, right? Caesar will be accused of using violence and intimidation and ignoring the will of the gods, whereas the senatorial elite, the conservative elites, will be accused of misrepresenting religion, right, and trying to obstruct Caesar in an invalid way. So this is kind of where things start to go wrong. From this time on, Caesar managed all the affairs of state alone. Functionally, he's just the consul, after his own pleasure. Now, to get the joke that Suetonius tells us next, you have to understand that when the Romans, like if you read the calendar of Roman years, or you read a Roman history of Rome, the year is measured based on who was consul. Like they don't have a year number they don't have a king, so they can't say it was in the 5th year of thus and such king. So the way the Romans measure time is they say in the consulship of Pompey and Crassus, right? Or in the consulship of, Marius and Carbo, right? It's like they use what's called a consular year. So there's always, obviously, 2 consuls, so it's always in the year of Caesar and Bibulus. That's what the year should be. But the joke was, right, that that year, which was the year 59 BC, was the year of, instead of Bibulus and Caesar, was the year of Julius and Caesar, right? And the joke is, right, that Caesar ran the show. So they just use both of Caesar's names to say that he basically had his way at this point. So Caesar at this point is able to get all of these laws through. He settles Pompey's veterans on land, and, by the way, he pulls a Saturninus, where he requires all the senators to take an oath that they will not undo the land bill, and they all agree to it. So they all take an oath that Caesar's land, that Pompey's veterans will be given land. Crassus's tax farming friends in Asia Minor are bailed out. All of Pompey's deeds in the east, all of his treaties and everything, all the land all of that is ratified. All of that is now made official, and Pompey is going to get credit for doing all of that. Now, at this point, obviously this is a situation that's very alarming, even for neutral people. And I think Caesar lost any support among neutral people at this point. So Cicero, for example, who doesn't love Caesar but had not actively opposed him yet, starts opposing Caesar. Cicero, who is at the height of his power, is giving speeches in the Senate against Julius Caesar. He is very, very concerned. Clodius is an ally of Caesar and has kind of has some of the mob on his side. And so Caesar attempts to do a favor for Clodius, which might help him. And that is, Clodius wants to move from a patrician family and become adopted into a plebeian family so that he could become tribune of the plebs and wield that power. Caesar agrees to let Clodius do that. So as consul, he supervises that adoption. So Clodius moves from the patricians into the plebeians so that he can run for consul in the next year, which is going to be 58 BC. And then the tribunes decide, the tribunes of the plebs decide at the very end of this year, 59 BC, to switch out Caesar's province. So again, this is like a Gaius Marius move, right? Use the plebeian tribunes to undermine the will of the Senate and the centuriate assembly and the magistrates. So we have, this is all the stuff that Sulla tried to undo. Sulla didn't want any of this stuff to stay in the Roman constitution, and now it's all happening again, right? The stuff that led to ultimately Sulla marching on Rome is happening again within just a few decades. And so, yeah, the plebeian tribunes secure a vote to get Caesar's province transferred to Gaul. Okay, and Gaul is pretty important because for Caesar, because what he is going to do is he is going to not just kind of manage that province. He has very ambitious plans to actually overrun the entirety of that area. Not just so he's given what's called nearer Gaul. Spell Gaul, right? Gaul. What? I just did it. Gaul and Illyricum, right? And he's given Illyricum as well. So he's given 2 provinces, and he is given 5 years. So he's given a 5-year, unprecedented length governorship of these 2 provinces. He takes 4 legions with him. So he has a pretty good sized army. He has a 5-year imperium. He has multiple provinces that he can now use to basically clear out Gaul. And at this point, I think everybody starts to realize, if they had not yet, that there was a secret pact. that Pompey and Crassus and Caesar, their interests all, right? If mistakes are all being, right, in theory, politics should be random, right? But if everything's happening in one direction, even if you don't know why, that likely suggests that there is some kind of alliance there, which is just that we don't know about it. And that's what I think Romans start to conclude at this point. Now, hey, Pompey and Crassus and Caesar, their interests are all lining up and moving in the right direction together.
Did you get something out of that video? Did you learn a little more about Roman history? If you did, would you click that like button? It's a small thing that you can do that really helps grow the channel. Maybe you have a question about something we talked about, or I didn't talk about something and you want to share a comment. Maybe you know something a little bit more about the topic. Would you write that question or comment in the comments of this video? I read all of them. Sometimes I learn things. I answer questions in the comments, and other people read those comments as well. So what you write in the comments might be useful for another person that views this video. And finally, if you want to keep up with the channel, why don't you click that subscribe button? That way you'll get videos every time I upload them. If you'd like to go a little bit further and deeper into the history of ancient Rome, I have a podcast. It's called the Pax Romana Podcast, P-A-X, Pax Romana Podcast. It's available anywhere. They're about 20-minute episodes, one released every week. We start with the big history of Rome, starting with the death of Julius Caesar, and then going as far as we can go. There are some big highlights during that period, obviously things like the reign of Nero and the Great Fire, the birth of the empire under Augustus, the reign of Marcus Aurelius, Rome's Stoic emperor, also the rise of the church, the crisis of the 3rd century. You're welcome to start with episode 1, and you can just listen to that podcast like it's an audiobook, basically, in little 20-minute chapters. Or maybe you want to dip in particular episodes. You can just look through the back catalog and find what you like. Or maybe you've got a friend or a relative that's really interested in some particular aspect of Roman history and wants to learn about it in a quick 20-minute chunk. Why don't you send them a link to one of the episodes of the Pax Romana podcast? Thanks a bunch for checking out the podcast. Thanks for watching this video. Take care.